in my young teens, I believe that I accepted Christ, but I didn't fully live out a Christ-like life. My mother was a believer in Christ. My father believed in God, but he didn't know Christ until a couple of years before he passed.
I would agree that it's not biblical, that once you become Christian, then you have to donate everything to the poor, and then you have to live in a monastery, and then that's the rest of your life.
If you're getting to know me personally, and you ask me about myself, and you ask where my joy comes from and why I'm always so happy, I'm going to tell you it's because Jesus lives in my heart. So I tell them these things. I encourage them to go to their church locally there, find a church. And somebody, I guess, didn't feel that was appropriate. So they told me I had to stop. And I told them no. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stop that. It's who I am.
Mr. Scott Horstmann, thank you so much for coming on the show. As always, we're going to get straight into it. How did you come to your faith in Christ?
Well, early on in my young teens, I believe that I accepted Christ, but I didn't fully live out a Christ-like life. So I move on beyond, I was probably 15 about that time, going to church with my mom, and she was a heavy influence there, which was great. And it wasn't really until I had moved out of the Kansas City area and back to Oklahoma after a 6-year stint in the Washington, D.C. area where I met my wife. We were sitting in church at Putnam City Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, pretty large church, and we were up in the balcony because we had the kids. And I just felt the altar call and went on down, and I could say that I rededicated my life or I started my life, but I got more serious about being a real Christian, one that walks the walk, not just talks the talk. So I'm going to attribute it to that point because it took me a long time and a lot of temptation in my life through the passages that I remembered at that point in my life between, say, 15 and I was probably 25, was that the way I interpreted the Bible was, if I live a Christian life, I've got to give up everything. And I was much more materialistic at that point. And it scared me. And it literally scared me for probably 10 years of my life. My wife and I had a home in Oklahoma City in the northwest section, and we had a nice little pool there and some neighbors that had a daughter that was the same age as our daughter and the same name as our daughter, and they were born like 2 or 3 days apart. So Jennifer and Jennifer, right next door to each other, 2 adorable little girls. And on Sundays, my wife and I would be doing projects, and I'd do woodworking in my garage, and, great friends and friendly, and they would often say, hey, you want to come to church with us? And no, we're good. We're good. We're getting along just fine. And then finally, after enough of their kind requests, we thought, you know what, they're just going to keep asking us, so we're going to have to go. And so we went and really felt connected at that point. And I think that's what led us to the point where I rededicated or accepted Christ at that point in my life and took it more seriously.
Did you say that you were raised in a Christian home? You said your mom was an influence.
Yes. It was her and my father, both believers. My mother was a believer in Christ. My father believed in God, but he didn't know Christ until a couple of years before he passed. And it's a whole nother story there. But my mom was the heaviest influence. Her name is funny. Her name is Kathleen Chapman, but nobody knew her by that name. They knew her by the name Happy. So everybody in her life, her mom, her dad, her sisters and brothers, everybody called her Happy. So that's who she was. She was Happy, married to Charlie Horstmann. So that happiness came from Christ. And I think I share some of that today and probably have since I was 25-ish, roughly.
So when you said that you were afraid, or the biggest concern for you was to give up everything, what do you mean by that? Was it
All of my physical belongings? I thought I was going to have to give it all away. It was just I couldn't make money. I couldn't have nice things because I had to live a pauper's life.
Is that true though? Do you think that's biblical?
No, I was just confused and materialistic.
Because I think that's a general assumption that I would agree that it's not correct. It's not biblical. That once you become Christian, then you have to donate everything to the poor, and then you have to live in a monastery, and then that's the rest of your life.
That was kind of my perception. That was the fear. And honestly, I wanted to share that on your podcast because I've thought of that throughout my life, and I'd hate for that same fear to be keeping somebody else from accepting Christ today. Because I understand it now. I'm on the other side.
So then what does that really mean then with when Jesus says, if you wish to follow me, let him deny himself and take up his cross?
Well, the way I interpret the scripture is denying yourself is denying your will and allowing it to be his will. But what it took me till age 25 to begin to understand, his will is for me to have a much greater life than I could possibly imagine.
And a lot of times people will say, oh, we'll agree with you, but then I think it starts seeping into the whole prosperity gospel with the great, right? The great life doesn't necessarily mean money and bigger house and, pool in the backyard. But in reality, it's when you are following God's will, that's where true joy and fulfillment is found.
Absolutely.
And that means we're not seeking the worldly desires anymore to make us happy. Because I think that's the greatest lie ever told is, oh, I have to now give up my worldly possessions to follow Jesus, and now I'm not going to be happy, which is completely not the truth.
And that was just the great deceiver talking. I was listening to the wrong spirit.
Because when you're on the flip side, when you're on the other side, you look back and go, why was I holding on to all that garbage?
Yeah.
It doesn't provide me anything.
Not a thing.
Some of the most stressed out, depressed people I've met are the richest, are the ones who have it all. And they're always just stressed about losing it all.
Yeah.
But I think that's just a deep rabbit hole that people will get into when they're not in Christ. So once you went to that, you had that altar call, and you rededicated yourself. What did life look like after that? Was it the same?
I mean, I didn't feel any immediate transition. I mean, yes, I had the feeling of being overcome with the Holy Spirit when I did that. But beyond that, life was normal, but life was much more hopeful because my future was secure. I could die today, and I've lived a wonderful life. I am absolutely not afraid of death. Now, I'd like to stay around for a little while. I think there's a few more things that I need to get done. But if the Lord's got another plan, I'm all for it.
I love it. Tell me about your time at Foot Locker.
Okay. So where do you want me to start? You know part of my story.
How did you start at Foot Locker? How old were you? How did you come to that point?
Well, I've got to come back to a point where I think I really decided who I was going to be as a man. And it was when I was still in high school. I was about 18, and I'd been going to Votech through Oak Park High School. I'd go to Oak Park for like an hour and a half, and then I'd go over to Maple Woods, and I was studying aviation maintenance technology. So I was going to be an aircraft mechanic. My father had retired from TWA. That's where he spent all of his life, his career outside of the Army. And So I was kind of following that pathway, loved airplanes, loved airlines, traveled a lot. And I was getting, my dream was to get my AMP license, my airframe and power plants, and then get my pilot's license so I could own a plane, fly a plane, and fix a plane, because one of the most expensive things about flying a plane is the maintenance on it. Mm-hmm. So things changed a little bit. Again, that was my plan, not God's plan. But I had been going for 2 years, and we had taken a ski trip to Colorado. And on that ski trip, I was trying to impress a young lady, and I did what's called a daffy off of a ski jump. Well, I should do the air quotes on ski jump, because it really wasn't a jump. It was a mogul. And a daffy is when you go over the jump and then you scissor your legs, one up, one down. And the problem was the down ski tip caught the ground, threw me on the ground immediately, and dislocated my hip. So now I've got ski patrol taking me down the hill and in the ambulance, bumpy ride off to the hospital. They put me in a full body cast, basically from my neck down to my knees, and then they load me up on my back in the back of the Ford Bronco that we drove to Colorado in, and they drive me back in a body cast. I go into North Kansas City Hospital, and I'm in traction for 6 weeks. The reason that's relevant here is that with the FAA, they require a specific number of class hours before you can take your FAA exam. So I had the knowledge from the power plants, but I didn't have the class hours. I got to the end of the period. I told my instructors, I said, look, I can't take the test. I don't have enough hours. And they said, no problem. Just falsify your time record here and we'll sign off on it. And they didn't use the word falsify. They just said, fill out your time record like you were here and we'll sign off on it. And that's the point where I think I really decided what kind of man I was going to be. I looked him in the eye and I said, no, that's not who I am. I'm not going to lie about this. So I took all the makeup time I could there, and then I went around to the next year to do the makeup time so I could take my license. But what happened in the meantime was Foot Locker. So, okay, I'm not going to go work for TWA. I'm going to do something for a year and then come back, finish my training, and then get off into the airline business. So I took a job with Foot Locker. They hired me as a management trainee, which I thought was really impressive. I was 18 and it had the word management in it, so I felt I was the boss. But the truth be known, there were 250 stores for Foot Locker at that point, 256 I think when I started, and everybody they hired full-time was a management trainee. If you weren't a management trainee, you were part-time. That was it.
I like it.
Because they were growing so much, they needed to look toward anybody that could run and operate their stores.
They needed leaders,
expand.
yeah. I like it.
So that was Metro North when it existed. That's where I started and did real well. So 9 months later, I was promoted to store manager in Topeka. So I went out to Topeka White Lakes Mall, which that mall's not there either, and managed that store for about a year and a quarter. And we had some real good fortune at that point that I had won what's called a big trip, and that big trip took me to London, England for a week, and they wined and dined and had all sorts of a great time. But that started my Foot Locker career, and I think that big trip got me recognized by some of the executives. So not long after coming back from the England trip, I was offered a promotion. Now, up to this point, I was really excited about the possibility of being promoted to Oak Park Mall. That was like the jewel in the Kansas City market. My store in Topeka was doing $420,000 a year, $420,000 a year, and the store in Oak Park Mall was doing about $625 to $650. And it was like a 50% increase in volume. It's like, that'd be a great promotion. I'll be back in Kansas City. Everything's wonderful. Well, they offered me a promotion to Landover, Maryland. And my first thought is, where the heck's Landover, Maryland? And I figured out pretty quickly it's right outside Washington, D.C. It's where the Capitol Center is. And so I checked in with my grandmother because that year my mother had passed away. And we were pretty close, my mom and I. And so I got closer with my grandmother. And I was telling her that this opportunity I was offered. And she could tell what I was really asking is, would it be okay for me to go? Because I was worried about her and me not being around for her. And she said, don't worry about me, Scott. If this is what you feel you need to do, go. And I did. So I went. I checked into the store. The store was doing about $800,000 at that time. So that's even a better promotion than what I could have imagined. And I thought I was the best thing on the planet. They obviously picked me because I was the absolute best opportunist best manager to go run that store. Funny thing is, when I checked into the store, the manager that had opened the store 3 years earlier, we do an inventory together, so I got to know him a little bit. But he made a comment when he left the store after I checked in, and he said, "Scott, this store has peaked." So what he was telling me is that all the volume you're ever going to get out of this store annually, I've already done, so you can't beat my numbers. And I looked him back in the eye. I was a little bit cocky at that point. Confident, cocky, I don't know. What's the difference? So I looked him back in the eye, and I said, "Tom, this store hasn't peaked until the day I check out." Well, shortly after that, I thought, well, I'm a successful manager now, and I need to find me a wife. So I started looking for a wife. Didn't work out well at all. So I gave up looking for a wife, and I met my wife, Mandy, who we've been married 41 years as of this October 30th. Wow. So that's the blessing. That's why I went to Maryland. That's clear now. Yeah. But the statement I made to Tom was true. We took that store from $800,000 to $2.2 million in 6 years, broke all the records that Foot Locker had at that time, largest volume store on the continent of the U.S., and I got promoted to a district manager position in Oklahoma. So that's how I got to Oklahoma. And then I had married Mandy, and we'd been married about 3 years. We had our daughter, Jennifer, and 2 weeks after she was born, we drove out to Oklahoma City, and I began as a district manager out there. So I'm there for about 10 years, 9 or 10 years as a district manager. The last year I was a district manager for Foot Locker, I was their district manager of the year. And the only reason I bring that up is because after I had won that award, I was called into the office, 233 Broadway, New York. That's where the F.W. Woolworth building is, and that's where Foot Locker was headquartered at the time. And the human resource vice president had invited me to come up and see him. Well, I use the word invite, but it's kind of like get on a plane, come see me. So I thought it was a little odd because my regional manager wasn't with me. And normally when you're seeing executives, your immediate supervisor is there with you. So I got into the office, and he went through some pleasantries, and then he got right to it. He said, I've had people report that you've been talking to your store managers about church. That's the way he put it. And I said, yes, absolutely. And he said, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, yes, I can. The way it was designed as a district manager, we would go into the store at 10 o'clock in the morning and would surprise the store manager. They didn't know I was coming. I spent an entire day evaluating their entire operation in all the areas that Foot Locker wants it to be evaluated in. And then by about 5 or 6 o'clock, me, the store manager, and their spouse go out to dinner so we can get to know them personally. Well, if you're getting to know me personally and you're asking me about myself and you ask where my joy comes from and why I'm always so happy, I'm going to tell you it's because Jesus lives in my heart. So I tell them these things. I encourage them to go to their church locally there, find a church. And somebody, I guess, didn't feel that was appropriate. So they told me I had to stop. And I told them no. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stop that. It's who I am.
Yes. Yes.
So within about, just a couple of months, I had several visits from my immediate supervisor. And I learned from kind of a back door, if you will, that he was evaluating my store or my district, and then he was falsifying information to send to the corporate office about what I was or what I'm doing. And the only reason I knew this is because I'd already been a district manager for 8 years before he got to that region. And the previous regional manager had the same secretary, and I had a really good relationship with her. So she called me and said, hey, what's going on with your store? I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, Clyde's writing this, and Clyde's writing this. And of course, no, she probably shouldn't have called me, but she did, which was great. And I learned that he was just basically bad-mouthing me with false information to the corporate office so he could prepare to do something else with my career. So he came in, a few months later. They said, we're going to take you off the district, Scott, and you can manage a store here in your own area, or you can leave. And so I didn't want them to feel that I'd been beaten, so I went ahead and accepted the store locally, managed it for about 9 months, broke, all the records the store had done with sales and profit and all, and just to show them that, they hadn't beaten me. And then I could wipe my hands clean and I could walk away.
I have a couple questions. First, backing up to when you were 18, 19, and you worked as an assistant manager for 9 months. What do you think was the reason why they promoted you?
Well, what I thought then was because I was awesome. I mean, why else would a guy that's 18, 19 years old get promoted to a store manager in 9 months? Maybe it was because they were desperate. I don't know. You know, I'd mentioned earlier, remember I was such a great manager, I got promoted to Landover, Maryland. Well, what I didn't include in that story earlier is I was actually about the 12th or 13th person they offered that store to. So I thought I was really cool, but I was just whoever would accept the store because it was a difficult part of town. And in fact, the week before I checked in, they had found a dead body in the dumpster right outside of where our store was. So I think there were a lot of store managers that were afraid of that area. Mm-hmm. I wasn't. I just went in, loved on the people, really enjoyed it, loved the culture. In fact, one of my best customers was Sugar Ray Leonard. So if anybody knows of him, Sugar Ray and Little Ray and Juanita would come in, and Juanita would buy little warm-up suits for Little Ray. So if you look back at any of the photos of Sugar Ray or Little Ray in the 80s and early 90s, I probably sold them those warm-up suits. Well, I say I did. My store did. My assistant managers really did more taking care of them than I did. So I just kind of schmooze a little when they came in and let the assistants do the good work for them.
So I see a pattern, though. You go into a store and you work your magic, and then the sales go up. What's in the magic?
Loving people. Just love them where they are. Empower them to do the job that they're hired and trained and paid to do. And guide and direct as best I see fit. You know, I watch for areas that I have a unique ability to quickly identify things that aren't right, which can be a blessing and a curse all at once. So I can have a very critical eye, but I can pick up on nuances fairly quickly. And I always try to bring things down to real basic terms. When I was a district manager, I had a store manager that did an excellent job of that too. His name was Steve McCullough. And we ended up, as a district manager, I won a trip 3 different years to Lake Tahoe for the Pro-Am golf tournament. And I was the am part, not the pro part. But the reason I won that trip is because that store manager, Steve McCullough, said, hey, because we were always wanting to, it was a promotion on accessories. So not just the shoes, it's what do you sell the customer besides just the shoes? And we love the Bronson Ko insoles. And so I'd have all the stores, you know, working on selling those and showing them to customers. But Stephen took a little different approach, and it was just brilliant. He didn't tell the customer about it. He put one in one shoe and one without it in the other, and then tried the shoe on the customer. And they tried both of them on, and it's like, this one feels so much better. Oh, I put this $8 Bronson Ko insole in that one. This one's without it. So you want the shoes and the insole, or just the shoes? And it's like,
that is brilliant.
Sold a bunch. And for 3 years, I won these great trips for that. So,
Wow. So then give me an example. When you say loving on the people, what comes to mind? What does that look like?
Well, there were definitely opportunities and instances of tough love, no doubt about it. I, as a store manager, as a district manager, I always took the presence that I would much rather them dislike me now and respect me later than respect me now and dislike me later. So by that, I would tell people what the truths were so that they could at least have the proper foundation to make decisions. Some of those truths were they weren't doing well, and here's how they need to improve, and here's how you can improve. Some people choose to do that, some don't. But I just try to be very fair to people, or fair with people, and be kind to them. But also, we had to run a pretty tight ship to do that kind of volume and sustain that. I learned as a manager in Landover to really trust my team. I think when I was in Topeka, I did most of it my way. And I think I learned pretty quickly when I got to Landover that I needed to learn what they know about the culture, about the customers, about the merchandising, about the way to interact with them, and the way to be sure you don't get stolen from. I mean, we had all sorts of incidents of shoplifting and really brazen at times. But I learned a lot being there and really enjoyed that.
It was mostly part-time employees, right?
Not at a store at that volume. The idea was to bring them in, train them, and then hire new and move them out to other stores. So I would have a staff. In fact, interestingly, my wife, Mandy, I was able to hire her part-time to do bookkeeping because we were at such a volume and it hadn't been done before. But I asked my district manager, say, look, I don't have time to keep up with these books because all the tickets, this was before POS. So we had a 3-part NCR form. Every single pair of shoes, accessories, socks we sold, you write out all these numbers. And then at night, you have to add them all up. You break them up by department. You run the totals. You check the cash. It was just quite an ordeal. So that was really great when she and I worked together there doing that.
So the whole goal was to hire people on full-time and then send them out.
Teach them to become store managers or take them up through the program. There was like a 4-phase program.
How long did that take? Usually on average?
Year and a half.
So you could take somebody off the streets, no experience, and turn them into a Foot Locker manager of a store.
Yes.
That's great. I love that. Wow. So then with the whole getting up to that regional side where you're managing, how many stores were you managing?
Anywhere between 15 and 22. It changed every year because I had such a broad territory. I mean, I was a road warrior. I covered Oklahoma, Arkansas, and parts of West Texas, or parts of Arkansas, parts of West Texas, and all of Oklahoma. So depending upon how they wanted to change that alignment around, the district manager in Little Rock might pick up a couple of those Arkansas stores, but then I might go deeper into West Texas. And
So when you showed up, I mean, you're really there to kind of see what they're doing right, but probably more importantly, what they're not doing correct. Yeah. So how do you handle that with that store manager on bringing to their attention the things that they're not doing correctly, but not crushing them at the same time?
That's a pretty complex question.
Yeah, I'm asking for myself.
I don't know if we have time on this podcast for that answer.
Is there any simple tips that you could share with the quote-unquote audience, aka me?
Well, for me, I think what helped a lot was the fact that I had come all the way up through the program.
Yeah.
So I knew what their job was. I had done their job.
Yeah.
I understood their job, and I did it pretty well. So it's just helping them understand how to better protect their inventory, because that was a big deal with things getting ripped off, because the managers are responsible to keep their inventory at a certain percentage to volume. And if they don't keep well-organized stores, they can't keep their inventory, keep track of it very well. So that was a big piece of it. Constantly recruiting people. You can't just wait for them to come in the door. You've got to go out to all the other stores in the mall. And when you see somebody that impresses you, or at a restaurant, at a bookstore, wherever you're at, just say, hey, have you ever thought about doing something different? And then you get people coming, hey, here's my card if you ever do. Well, I never thought I'd want to work for neither did I. I mean, I was going to be an aircraft mechanic. What am I doing here? So I think that helps a lot too, and the people make a big difference. Now, I did fight the grain a little bit as a Foot Locker manager and a district manager. They always really wanted low wages, and that is the wrong equation, because what I understand is if you really work on tightening your wages, you're losing customer service. Yes. And we were always excellent at customer service. People loved, whether they bought anything or not, they had fun. We had fun. We're laughing. We're joking. We're having a great time. So they're going to have a great experience whether they buy something or not. But, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, but what you just said is so valuable. It really goes back to the whole idea of you got to pay to play. So if you want customer service, you can't expect to just hire a bunch of minimum wagers. I mean, not that they can't do it, but they're really not going to be fully vested if they're not getting taken care of financially, so they can, live a decent life.
Yeah. Well, what I was heading to earlier, and I forgot for a moment, is I would never run the store in the district with the lowest wages. That was never my goal. My goal was the highest profits.
Yeah. Yes.
Because that's what pays the bills.
But a lot of people think lowest wages equals highest profits.
Corporately. They all believe that, but I proved them all wrong. Yeah. My store was never the best wage controlled store. It was probably in the top 5 because my volume kind of dictated that, because it got a little easier that way. But I was always the top on profits, both in my district, in the store I managed before I was district manager, and the store I took over afterwards, because I invested in the people, and the people provided the service. And when you provide them the service, they provide the business. Bingo. And it's just a simple business formula. Yeah. When you take care of your customers, like you take care of them here in your studio. Mm-hmm. Now, this studio, but your martial arts studio. When you take care of your people like that, they're going to tell others. It's that simple. And that's your absolute best marketing.
I love it.
People telling people.
Yes, sir. Let's transition to you becoming what you are today, which is the founder of Christian Brothers Roofing. Let's walk through that story of how do you go from Foot Locker to then owning this business?
Well, I had to come to realization that I was unemployable. I don't know why, but it seems like somehow I intimidate people. I don't try to, but I just realized that working for somebody else always backfired for me for some reason. I got demoted from Foot Locker, right? I didn't mention it earlier, but I started a career with Lowe's, and I managed a Lowe's store here in Kansas City for a little while, and I ended up getting fired from that. But the thing is, I got fired for doing the right thing, but I didn't follow the right policy when I did it. So that's when I decided it's like I've just got to do my own thing. I got to be, I'm obviously unemployable. But no, I had some experience. I was a business coach for several years, and both in Tulsa and here in Kansas City. And a fellow that I was working with, I kind of called him my partner, but we didn't have any legal arrangement in that. We both had clients that were roofing companies. One was a residential roofing company. That was his client. And mine was a commercial roofing company. So I had some understanding of the inner workings of the business and how it operates, the cash flow and those things. And come 2006, my, quote, partner had come to me and said, hey, my residential roofing company is just super busy. There's been this big hailstorm across the northern part of Kansas City, and they don't have enough salespeople, enough estimators to go out and write bids. And I said, well, hey, I met a guy last night. That was Thursday, so it was Wednesday night. I was at Wednesday night church, and he had just lost his job with Home Depot. He had 4 kids and was married, and I thought, well, he probably needs a job. So I reached out to him and connected him. They hired him, and that was great for about a month. And then they came back to me again. It's like, hey, you got anybody else? Could you do this? And because I was coaching, but I would have blocks in my calendar that were available. My clients would hire me for 2, 3, or 4 hours, and generally that's once a week or once every couple of weeks or even once a month on some of the clients. So I'd have, my calendar would look like Tetris. There would be these different blocks open and different blocks closed. So if I line them up, then I could have better blocks. So for about 2 years, I'd started some part-time sales. And the funny thing is I was their top salesman for 2 years or 3 years, part-time, when they had like 6 or 7 or 8 other full-time salespeople. And I never did understand that. It's just people don't apply themselves, or they weren't having fun or something. I don't know what it was. But I learned that there were, on that residential roofing company, there were a lot of things they weren't doing right. They weren't taking care of their people, and I actually ended up auditing some files, and they were actually stealing from their salespeople as well. But more importantly to me, when I talked to a customer and I told them we were going to put on this great roof because that's what the owner of the business told me he was going to do, and when I went to hold that crew accountable to do that during the installation, he backed up the crew instead of me. And then I realized that I can't put my name on these jobs. So we parted ways, and I worked part-time for another roofing company for a little while in the city, and he was not paying his crews right. So he wouldn't pay them their full earnings, and that really bothered me. So at the end of 2008, I just made the decision that, look, I'm not finding too many companies here that are doing things right now. The business that I was coaching, they were doing really well. They operated the business well. It was a commercial roofing company, still in business today. They've sold, they've changed ownership, but very successful roofing company. So, and I'm not saying that that's why, because I was coaching them. No, I had coached the previous business owner, and then he sold to the current owner. But I decided that somebody really had to do this right. And that's when I raised my hand to myself and said, okay, I'm going to do this. So we started the company in January of 2009, and here we are today.
Did you start with any of your family members with you as part of that company?
Me.
Just you?
Me. I was sales, production, accounting, everything. My wife, Mandy, at that time, she said, she's still my wife, but at that time, and I love her, don't misunderstand that, baby. she had said early on when I started the company that that she didn't want to have anything to do with it. And then as I got busier doing estimates and selling roofs and working on installing the roof, she noticed my accounting was kind of falling behind, and she said, "I need to get in and help you with this." And it's like, yes, okay. I mean, oh
Your
darn,
idea.
honey, do you think, you know? And so she came on board, and she's still with us today, although she was supposed to retire this year. So I'm still working on that. That's my one failure so far. I've not been able to let her retire.
How many members do you have today, part of the company?
Employees, full-time are 26. And then our field crews, we've got, I think we're at about 10 crews right now that we work regularly.
How many of those employees are your family members?
Oh, okay. All 4 of my kids are full-time in our business. And there are 2 of my daughter-in-laws that are full-time in our business. And it looks like we may be bringing on a 3rd part-time.
And you guys still all like each other.
Yeah, that's funny. It's
incredible.
When I was a business coach, I'm a hypocrite. I apologize. I am a hypocrite because when I was a business coach, I would tell all of my clients, do not hire family. Just don't do it. Because I saw so many dysfunctional families. I did. And so I saw bad examples. But the problem is when I started building the business, I couldn't find non-family employees that wanted to work. They wanted to get paid. They didn't want to work. And fortunately, my wife and I raised our kids right, and they're not afraid of hard work. Mm-hmm. And so first was my son, Ryan. And it was kind of funny. I didn't tell you this story before, but he was living in Tulsa at the time because I had moved up from Tulsa to here with Lowe's and then later started the business. And so he was living in Tulsa, and we really wanted him to work with us. And he was kind of happy down there. So he said, well, hey, why don't I just start a division of Christian Brothers in Tulsa? So I said, okay, all right, well, I'll tell you what. If we're going to do this, it's all or nothing. So we're going to run for 6 months, and whichever division is more successful, Kansas City or Tulsa, we're going to close the other one down, and we'll just put it all into that one. I never moved. So he closed it down, and he came up here. Now, what I learned about my son there is he is absolutely excellent at sales and production, but marketing, not so much.
Yeah.
So he came up, and it's just been such a blessing. He has been with us through all of it. He right now runs all of our production on the residential side, which is a tremendous job. Keep managing 8 of those crews and a handful of employees that report directly to him, and all of the customer interaction about the production and such. So he works super hard with that. My middle son does our commercial sales. And then my youngest son actually works for my oldest son as residential sales, but he also has his own bailiwick that he is responsible for all of our solar shingle sales. Oh. Not solar panels, solar shingles.
So that works out with one brother reporting to the other?
So far, yeah. They think a lot alike, so it works really, really well for the 2 of them. And then my daughter is kind of the overall office manager and such. So
what's the secret? What's the secret to having employed family members and not wanting to kill each other at the end of the day?
Oh, that's real simple.
Yes.
Christ.
Yes. Bingo. Yep. With Christ, anything is possible, even the things that we tell other people not to do.
Oops.
Is there anything behind the name, Christian Brothers?
Well, first thing when we wanted to start the company, my wife and I were talking about different names, and the first several names that we thought of, we looked up and they were already registered in the state of Missouri. And a couple of years before that, I was seriously looking at buying a Christian Brothers automotive franchise. So I like the name.
That's what
I like the name and what it represented, and I love their operation. You go into any of their stores, I mean, they've got the cleanest waiting rooms of any car place ever, other than a brand new dealership, and they're kind of comparable. So great atmosphere, great people. I know a lot of the business owners for the Christian Brothers Automotive. And I thought, well, Christian Brothers Roofing. But, oh, man, I don't want them to think I'm taking their name. So I looked it up in the state of Missouri. And when I did, I looked up Christian Brothers. And the state of Missouri had 22 different companies named Christian Brothers. I thought, well, it's not just Christian Brothers Auto. It's Christian Brothers Plumbing. It's Christian Brothers this. It's like there's not a Christian Brothers Roofing. This will work. And I thought it was kind of I don't know what the term is you'd call it, but the fact that we were Christians, and I was hopeful that my family would be involved in the business. At
But you
that
didn't
point,
know
I
at
didn't
that
know.
time. Wow.
Did not know.
Wow.
But it's been really great because honestly, knowing that we're driving the trucks with Christian Brothers Roofing on the side, I mean, we try to drive a little better. We try to be a little courteous. We try to be a little kinder to people. And it just reminds us who we represent.
Is Christian Automotive, Christian Brothers Automotive, are they a Christian organization?
Yeah, they are.
I always wondered that.
They're a franchise out of Houston, but all of their individual franchise owners they sign a statement of faith before they could come on board. So
How are you bringing your faith into the workplace?
how do I not?
Do you have any examples of what does that look like? You showed me your operating.
How about Jesus and fishing? I mean, his faith was in their workplace. And I mean, some people misinterpret those Bible verses that we have to all pursue full-time ministry.
Right.
It's not it at all. Before he invited them to follow him, he showed them how to fish really great. He got boatloads of fish coming in. So he was all about fishing, but they were called to fish for men. You're called right here in your studios. Not the podcast studio, maybe the podcast studio, but we're your business, Coma, you're called to minister to those people. This is your congregation. Just like my employees and our customers are the people that I can talk to. And we have a statement of faith in our operating agreement with the state, and it's registered that we are a Christian-based company. So I'm going to talk very openly about my faith. And it's funny, when we did our first logo, it was a rooftop with a chimney, and I had the designer put a cross in it. And the guy that was doing it for me, he said, Scott, you know that's going to offend some people. And I said, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So
That's great. I love it. How can people find... Actually, no, before we get into that, I have to ask this question. What is most important to you when serving your customers? What's most important?
to honor our commitments, whatever they are.
I remember you shared with me a situation that you ran into with a customer where you had to make a decision on, are we going to fix this thing and then spend a lot of money or not? Can you share that story?
Sure. I think the one you're talking about is when one of the things we do for houses is we strive to ventilate them a lot better than the builders did. And a lot of times when you're working like in the Johnson County area back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I guess we're mid 2000s now, but back in that range through 2009 to 2015, there were a lot of wood shake roofs, and those wood shake roofs are not on top of a solid decking. So if any of those customers would go up into their attic, they would see what's called skip sheeting. It's 1x4 sheeting that go horizontal across the roof, but then there's a space the same width as the board, so a board space all the way up the roof. Well, when you're putting composition shingles on, you have to have a solid deck. So we took the opportunity when those shingles were off and you could get into where the insulation was, is to add baffles up and down the sides of the house so that the insulation doesn't block the airflow and you get a lot of the humidity out. Because as a wood shake roof, it's not that important, but when you do a composition roof and it's completely sealed up and completely watertight, it changes the thermodynamics of the house. So as a result of that, you really want to be on top of the ventilation. Well, this one particular house, we realized at the end of the job, there are all the baffles on the ground. They're not on the house where they belong. And the customer might not have known what those packages were and what they were for, but we did. So my son Ryan and I, we went up to the customer and we just told him, said, look, we goofed up. We goofed up big. We told you we were going to put baffles on your house to increase the airflow. We included this on your bid, and this is how much you paid for that. But we didn't do it. What would you like us to do? And whatever he said, we were going to do. If he said, tear it all off and do it again, we'll do it. He didn't. That worked out well for us financially in that respect. but I wanted to make sure that the customer understood the decision he was making and that he was in complete control, because we messed up and we want to make it right. And so he asked some questions and we answered his questions, and he ultimately decided that I think he took a cash benefit for not doing that, much more significant than what the cost of the baffles were, because I felt so bad about what we had not done on that job.
It seems that in the construction arena, that not telling them is kind of common.
You know, it's funny. I used to think that. And then I was talking to my sister-in-law, Betty. Betty was a dentist, and I was in her dental chair one day, and I was telling her that exact same thing back in the early 2000s. And she said, Scott, it's not just roofing. It's all industries. It's dental. Yeah. And she went on to tell me about the people that magnify your teeth and show you all these cracks. She said, those cracks are not a problem. They've been there since day one. It's not a big deal. Does it hurt? No. Is it a problem? No. Then don't fix it. It's the same thing. So, you know, she helped me appreciate that it wasn't just our industry quite a bit by just that little awareness that she taught me.
That's true. That is true. So you guys do residential and commercial roofing, and you guys are kind of getting more of a split, 50-50 on the amount of work you're doing between residential and commercial?
Not this year. This year, there's been quite a bit of storm activity, and the quicker movement on storm activity is in the residential sector. So very likely that would get maybe closer in 2025. Mm-hmm. It seems to take business owners longer to appreciate that the roof might be damaged by hail. Mm-hmm. Yet if you're a homeowner, all the neighborhood associations are talking about it, and on the neighborhood Facebook groups and all of that, signs go up, because as soon as it happens, there's a lot of predatory contractors, is what I call them, that will go into the neighborhood. They'll go in and tell everybody they have hail damage and tell them all to file a claim. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They don't care. So what we prefer to do is wait for people to call us. So we don't do any of that. We don't go out and door knock at these
storm
residences.
chasing. Yeah,
that's what it's called.
Yeah.
So we choose not to do that. We'd rather be invited to your property.
So practically, as a homeowner, after a big storm, we've had quite a few this summer, and when would I know it's time to get somebody like you to come out and check it out? Do I wait for a leak, or how do I know that?
Honestly, any time is a good time. If it's a year like now, it'll take us a little bit to get there. It might take us a week or two to get out to do the inspection. But since you don't know what to look for, and we do, and we don't charge for those inspections, get somebody out. It's not going to cost you. I mean, and it doesn't have to be us, just somebody that you called out, not somebody that came knocking on your door. Like I would ask people, let me ask you, Bronson, would you ever consider remodeling your kitchen with someone that just knocked on your door for business?
Not before I checked out all the other people.
Yeah.
Competitors.
So just do that.
Yeah.
Just do that. Yeah. I mean, if they're knocking on your door, there's a reason, right? Why are they knocking on your door? Why aren't they busy? Why aren't they doing work?
Good point.
Why are they knocking on your door? We don't have time to knock on doors. So,
I actually don't like it when they do that.
No.
It feels very intrusive.
It is.
You know, it might be effective, but to me, there's better ways. It's just feels very sleazy and just, again, intrusive. This is my personal dwelling, and we're eating dinner.
Well, unfortunately, in the roofing space, a lot of those people will ask people to, hey, we'll just get up on your roof, do a quick inspection. Won't cost you anything. Here, just sign this authorization form so I can get up there. My company requires this. And they don't look at that form. And what that form does, it locks them into them doing their roof and working with their insurance company.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty unscrupulous.
Wow.
So, yeah.
How can people find out more about Christian Brothers Roofing?
Just look us up on Google. You'll find us there.
And we'll add the link to our website.
Oh, thanks.
Mr. Horstmann, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such a fun show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me.